You're in a normal conversation. Nothing dramatic is happening. Someone makes a small comment. Everyone laughs, the topic changes, and the room moves on as if nothing important just happened. But your mind doesn't move on with them. It stays with the tone, the pause before the answer, the way someone looked away for half a second, the sentence that sounded casual but didn't feel casual. Later, when you're alone, you find yourself replaying it. Not because you want to, but because something in your mind keeps reaching back for the part everyone else seemed to skip. From the outside, it looks like overthinking. And maybe you have called it that too. Maybe you have told yourself you are too sensitive, too intense, too difficult, too hard to satisfy. Maybe you have watched other people live through the same moment and wondered how they can just let it go so easily, while your mind keeps turning it over like there is still a hidden piece inside it. But before you label that part of yourself as a flaw, it is worth asking a more careful question. What if the problem is not simply that your mind notices too much? What if the problem is that you were never really taught how to live with what you notice? There is a kind of person who does not experience life in only one layer. They hear the words, but they also hear the hesitation behind the words. They notice what people say, but also what people avoid saying. They can sit in a room and feel the mood shift before anyone names it. They can sense when a conversation is becoming shallow, when someone is performing confidence, when a smile is not really relaxed, and because this usually happens quietly, it is easy to misread. When they need time alone, people may think they are cold. When they stay quiet in a group, people may assume they have nothing to say. When they change their mind after learning something new, people may call them inconsistent. When they hesitate before answering, people may think they lack confidence. When they struggle to begin the work that matters most, they may even tell themselves they are lazy. The wound is not always the behavior itself. The wound is what that behavior gets translated into. A need for silence becomes selfishness. Careful thinking becomes insecurity. Emotional depth becomes weakness. A slow answer becomes a lack of intelligence. A private inner world becomes arrogance, distance, or difficulty. And after hearing these translations enough times, a person can start to believe them. They begin to wonder if something is wrong with them. They wonder why they cannot just be lighter, simpler, easier to read. They wonder why ordinary life seems to leave so much residue inside them. They wonder if their depth is real, or if it is just a prettier name for anxiety. That is where this becomes more personal than people usually admit. Because a mind that notices a lot can feel powerful from the outside, but inside it often feels like carrying too many tabs open at once. It is not just thinking more, it is trying to stay accurate. It is trying not to miss the thing that might matter. It is trying to understand the full shape of the room before it decides how to be in it. That is why some people are slow to speak. They are not empty. They are gathering. They are reading the emotional weather, the unspoken rules, the risk of saying something too true too soon. They may have an answer already, but they are also seeing the exceptions, the possible misunderstandings, the way one sentence could be taken 3 different ways by 3 different people. To a world that rewards fast certainty, this can look like doubt. But not all doubt is weakness. Sometimes doubt is what happens when a person sees enough complexity that pretending to be certain feels dishonest. The same thing happens with self-questioning. A person who thinks deeply may not trust their first reaction right away. They may revisit it later, test it against other possibilities, wonder whether they were fair, whether they missed something, whether their own emotion distorted the picture. This can become exhausting. It can also become useful. The difference is not always obvious at first, because the same mind that helps you see deeper can also trap you in loops. The same sensitivity that helps you understand people can make ordinary social life feel overstimulating. The same imagination that helps you picture what something could become can make it painful to start, because you already see every way the final result might fall short. So the issue is not whether this kind of mind is good or bad. It is both more precise and more tiring than that. The issue is what happens when you spend years being misunderstood for it. At some point, many people like this learn to calibrate themselves down. They stop saying the full thought. They leave out the deeper question. They make the answer easier. They laugh when the conversation gets thin. They pretend the comment did not affect them. They become very skilled at offering the version of themselves that other people can comfortably receive, not because they believe they are better than everyone else, not because they hate connection. Often it is the opposite. They want connection so much that they learn to reduce the parts of themselves that seem to make connection harder. And that creates a very specific kind of loneliness. Not the loneliness of having no one around. The loneliness of being around people while only a smaller version of you is allowed to enter the room. You can have friends and still feel unseen. You can be liked and still feel unknown. You can be included and still feel like the part of you that thinks, feels, notices, and questions most deeply has no real place to go. That is the hidden cost of a mind that notices too much. It does not only process the world, it also starts managing itself for the world. It learns when to speak and when to stay quiet, when to explain and when to give up, when to share the real thought and when to offer the socially acceptable one. Over time, the person may become so used to shrinking their inner life that they stop realizing they are doing it. But there is another side to this that has to be said carefully. Not every struggle is depth. Being alone is not always restoration. Sometimes it is avoidance. Thinking deeply is not always wisdom. Sometimes it is anxiety wearing an intellectual costume. Procrastination is not always a sign that you care too much. Sometimes it is fear, lack of structure, or the pain of not knowing how to begin. Feeling misunderstood is not always proof that the room is too shallow. Sometimes it means you have not risked being clear enough to be known. This matters because there is a comforting trap in turning every difficult pattern into evidence that you are special. It feels better than shame, but it does not always lead to freedom. If every form of avoidance becomes, I just need solitude, you never have to ask why connection feels unsafe. If every unfinished project becomes, my standards are too high, you never have to learn how to make imperfect work real. If every moment of self-doubt becomes, I just see more complexity, you never have to ask whether your thinking is helping you move or keeping you frozen. The goal is not to take every wound and turn it into proof of superiority. The goal is to understand what each pattern is doing for you, because many of these patterns began as protection. You observed carefully because at some point reading the room mattered. You became cautious with your words because being misunderstood felt costly. You spent time alone because the outside world could become too loud, too fast, too full of other people's needs. You doubted yourself because certainty felt dangerous while you could see how often people were wrong and still completely convinced. These patterns may have helped you survive your own sensitivity. They may have helped you stay accurate, stay safe, stay in control, or stay connected to yourself. But a pattern can be understandable and still need to change. That is where the real shift begins. Instead of asking, what does this prove about me? The better question is, what is this trying to protect? And is it still protecting me well? That question changes everything. If you need to be alone, the point is not to decide whether you are antisocial or deeply thoughtful. The question is whether your solitude is helping you return to yourself or helping you disappear from people who might actually matter. If you replay conversations, the point is not to shame yourself for overthinking or praise yourself for noticing nuance. The question is whether the replay is giving you useful understanding or just punishing you with endless possibilities you cannot resolve. If you hesitate to start meaningful work, the point is not to call yourself lazy or secretly brilliant. The question is whether your high standards are guiding the work or preventing the work from ever existing. If you feel like you do not belong, the point is not to decide that everyone else is shallow. The question is whether the environment truly cannot hold you, or whether you have learned to hide so much of yourself that no one has been given a real chance to meet you. This is not a checklist. It is a different way of looking. A more honest way to hold a deep mind is to stop treating every behavior as a verdict on who you are. Some patterns are gifts when they are guided, and prisons when they are left unquestioned. Your sensitivity can help you understand people, but it also needs boundaries around what you absorb. Your mind can search for accuracy, but it also has to learn when enough information is enough to move. Your solitude can restore you, but it cannot become the only place you feel safe. Your depth can make life richer, but it cannot be the reason you never let anything be simple. The third option is not to hate your mind or romanticize it. It is to build a life that can hold it. That may mean choosing people who do not punish you for having real thoughts. It may mean learning to speak before your idea is perfectly formed. It may mean letting a project exist in a flawed first version instead of protecting it forever inside your imagination. It may mean noticing when your mind is searching for truth and when it is searching for total safety, which is something life rarely gives. A mind that notices too much does not only need more insight, it needs somewhere to rest. It needs honest connection. It needs structure. It needs permission to be complex without becoming unreachable. It needs to stop using depth as a hiding place and stop treating simplicity as a threat. Because the point of being deep is not to live above ordinary life. It is to be more honestly inside it. To have conversations where you do not have to cut away every real edge of yourself. To make things even when they cannot match the perfect version in your head. To let people see you before you have translated yourself into something easier. To understand your patterns without letting those patterns become your identity. Maybe the hardest part is not that your mind notices too much. Maybe the hardest part is learning how to stay open in a world that often rewards people for being easier to understand. And maybe the question is not, how do I get everyone to understand me? Maybe the question is, how do I stop abandoning myself every time the world does not know how to read me? Because sometimes the deepest loneliness does not come from being alone. It comes from being around people while knowing only a smaller version of you is allowed to enter the room.